believe in justice and fairness, there is this scripture in the Bible found in the 2nd chapter of Luke, and it talks about how it says that they had to take Jesus outside or keep him outside because there was no room in the inn. And I want to talk today a little bit about no room in the inn for our children, on the right to an education of our Latino sisters and brothers, and on the need for leadership, because it is a shameful reality when there is no room in the inn. I want to thank Al McShirley for my legal redress of the NAACP and all of my good friends that I see out here on today. One of the facts we have to remember about Christmas is that Mary, Joseph, and the baby Jesus were treated as though they were illegal. The government wanted their money, their taxes, and their labor, but the same government did not want them to have dignity, worth, and recognition as fellow citizens with the common humanity. It was not safe during the first Christmas to be different from the empire. If you were not Roman, you did not mean much, and you were seen as a tool to be used, not a person to be respected. This was the context of Jesus' birth 2,000 years ago this evening. Jesus began his life as an alien with the experience of being unwelcome. Now, one writer says Jesus represents what we call backdoor divinity. He came through the back door to identify with the oppressed and to challenge those who take God's world and act as if it's their world, to challenge those who are quick to label people as aliens and illegal, whom God has declared are brothers and sisters made from one blood. When Jesus came, he found no room in the inn. The dominant culture did not welcome him. He was left on the outside. The rules of politics and fears of leaders exiled him in the very world that he declared God so loved. And whenever we participate in this kind of unwelcoming attitude and action against fellow members of the human family, we commit this sin all over again. While we are all talking about Christmas, while many of us are celebrating Christmas, let us remember the theology of Christmas. And at its very core is the welcoming and embracing of all humanity with God's marvelous love. And that love exposes the hypocrisy and sinfulness of attempting to deny fundamental opportunity to those who live among us. Any attempt on the one hand to claim allegiance to the Christian faith and then turn around and engage in political separatism is wrong. It's as wrong as it was for the slave master to worship Jesus on Sunday and treat black people as subhuman property and 3/5 of a person on Monday. The truth is, except for the Native Americans and the descendants of slaves, we're all immigrants. In the case of our Hispanic and Latino brothers and sisters, we cannot forget that the states like Texas and California were once Mexico. Part of the problem is we talk about these issues without historical references or proper historical references. How can you take the end during one part of history and then not let people back in the end that they once owned in another part of history? For instance, look for a moment at the history of Texas. Mexico's 1924 Constitution joined the area we now call Texas with Coahuila, the adjoining state on the southern banks of the Rio Grande. The Mexican Congress allowed the area to be called Texas, the option of forming its own state as soon as it feels capable of doing so. Mexico enacted the General Colonization Law in 1824, empowering all heads of households, regardless of race or immigrant status, to claim the land they lived on in Mexico. The first large land grant made when Spain still controlled the area was made to European Americans, called the Old 300, who had moved to the banks of the Brazos River in 1822. The Mexican government ratified this grant and many more land grants to white Americans. Many of these white Americans who were immigrants at this time in Mexico, settlers owned slaves, which had been outlawed by Mexico in 1829. Mexican President Anastasio Bustamante ordered all slaves owned by white Americans who had immigrated to Texas to be freed by 1830. To get around this law, many of the slave owners said their slaves weren't slaves but indentured servants for life. and they had 5,000 slaves in Texas by 1836. The United States made several offers to buy Texas because they wanted to keep slaves. The president of Mexico turned them down, and then outlawed immigration of U.S. citizens to Texas in 1830 and set up agents in the Texas state of Mexico to monitor immigration. The point I'm trying to make here is the very end that we try to keep people out of now, they used to own it. Scapegoating immigrants is as old as America, the land of immigrants. In 1854, for example, there were 4 times as many legal and illegal immigrants compared to the relative size of the nation today, according to Dr. Leon Fink of the University of Illinois in Chicago. What happened in 1854? A new political party was formed to stir up emotions against immigrants. It was quickly called the Know Nothing Party, and it campaigned solely on the issue of illegal immigrants. By 1855, the Know Nothing Party had elected a mayor in Chicago who promised to bar all immigrants from jobs. The Know Nothings in New England were able to pass laws regarding the reading of the Protestant Bible and barring the teaching. Listen to this is what was going on then, that's happening now, and barring the teaching of foreign languages in their public school. In 1855, Kentucky had 20 German immigrants that were lynched because of all of this hype against immigrants. At the same time, however, there was another movement and another party being formed called the Abolition Movement. It was fueled by righteousness and a desire to rectify the great sin of slavery committed against the human family. It ran counter to the Know Nothing movement. Dr. Fink recently wrote, a lawyer from Illinois named Abraham Lincoln came forward to provide political leadership that undercut the Know Nothing Party. Now, what's the point this morning? The point is, this is the kind of moral leadership we need in our elected leadership today, like Abraham Lincoln. Surely there must be leaders and candidates for leaders that have the courage to provide the same kind of leadership that will challenge this attempt to divide the human family, that will unite black and brown and white working people and create stronger labor and human rights rather than divide them. When there is no one else to blame for our problems but ourselves, one of the first divisions that always rises up in America is to blame the foreigners, people with dark skins and funny accents. We are disheartened in the NAACP by the would-be leaders of our great state so quickly joining the ranks of the modern-day Know Nothing Party, lending fuel to the scapegoating movement against our sisters and brothers who have moved here from Latin America. We believe everyone who would lead our state, Democrat and Republican, should clearly state that they believe in the Christ side of Christmas, and that our young sisters and brothers from Latin America should not be deprived of their rights to an education in our exceptional community college system. We should not do the wrong thing and then try to call it the right thing simply because it's an election year. Martin Luther King reminded us that leadership should not merely be thermometers that measure the temperature, but leadership ought to be thermostats that change the temperature. We should not, as a society, stoop to the depths of moral opportunism, unleashing the dogs of prejudice and fear instead of standing strong for right to a higher education.